Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We hope that you're taking some time during these last few days of summer to relax just a bit and recharge. And as you think back and reflect on last year and look ahead for the next school year that's about to begin, we know that this is such a busy time of year as you're getting ramped up, and we really appreciate you joining us. Before we begin, though, it's a good time to just review some of the logistical aspects of today's presentation. So if you want to check the audio setting on your computer, as well as your speaker volume, and if you're having any trouble, you might want to just try refreshing your browser. I'm going to do just a quick audio check just to make sure that the folks that are on the line can hear us. You'll see a question box in the right side panel for the webcast. If you wouldn't mind just typing yes in that box if you can hear us. Lots of yeses. Instead of saying yes, sometime I should just ask for, like, tell me something inspirational, or
that would be nice.
Tell me what you're most excited for, right? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Lots of yeses. Thank you for those of you that typed that in. Finally, so where you just typed in all these yeses is where you can also pose questions for Kai-leé and I, and we'll do our best to answer some questions throughout the webinar. And those of you that were not able to address your questions during the webinar we'll follow up with afterwards. And then lastly, an on-demand archive of today's presentation will be available in about the next 2 weeks or so, at which time you'll receive an email with a link and instructions of how to access this archive, or even forward or share with a colleague. All right, so let's get started. My name is Breeyn Mack, and I am the Senior Director of Educational Content here at Teaching Strategies. Oh, thank you. And I am joined today by Kai-leé Berke, our CEO, and his longtime colleagues and former teachers and program directors ourselves.
And as two moms who spend an awful lot of time talking about our own young children together.
Yes, that is true. We couldn't be more excited to speak about a topic today that we both hold so close to our daily work and our personal lives as mothers as well, which is relationships. So today's webinar, Positive Relationships, the Heart of All Teaching, is actually part 2 in a 3-part series, Fidelity in the Preschool Classroom, Best Practices in Action. This series was intended to explore some of the different aspects of what fidelity looks like in a high-quality preschool program using the creative curriculum, where we spend some time detailing and exploring developmentally appropriate practice and strategies in supporting and strengthening children's learning and development in preschool. The series was structured so that each webinar focused on a particular area of focus from coaching to fidelity for the creative curriculum for preschool. So for the first webinar, we discussed the physical environment and thinking through the structure of the day. And if you missed that one, you'll find it in archived on our events and webinars section of our website, and there'll also be a follow-up link in the follow-up email that you'll receive after this webinar. And then today, for our second webinar in the series, we'll be exploring teacher-child interactions. And then our series will conclude next month with a discussion on assessment and teacher-family partnerships, which was interesting. A couple of folks that sent in questions ahead of time said, if there's time, we'd love to hear more about building positive relationships with families. So we're excited that that was already what was on deck to speak about next. So since the topic of teacher-child interactions is so incredibly robust, for the purposes of the only hour that we have together today, Kai-leé and I thought it was best to refine our exploration of teacher-child interactions to the context of beginning the year. Children's first interactions and experiences with you as a teacher, a co-teacher, and an admin, it just can't be undervalued. The positive messages you introduce and reinforce throughout the first days and weeks of the school year, that's what's laying the foundation for an entire year's worth of learning and discovery. The investments you make in presenting your classroom as a caring and collaborative learning community are the building blocks necessary to ensure that all children and families can be successful in your program.
So for those of you that have joined us on webinars before or seen us present at conferences, you've heard us say this over and over again, but it always bears repeating. Now, we believe at Teaching Strategies, and human development research and theory back us up, that all learning takes place within the context of relationships, and that relationships are at the heart of all good teaching. They're the very pulse of a high quality early childhood program. And supporting and nurturing those relationships is really at the core of everything we do here at Teaching Strategies, and certainly at the core of all of the important work you're doing in your programs. Relationships can only develop, grow, and thrive when an educator is committed to consistently nurturing, caring interactions in the classroom. And what encourages these relationships to develop is a supportive and empathetic classroom environment, a positive classroom climate where children know they're supported and respected as vital and valuable members of this classroom community. As the beginning of the school year approaches, I was struck recently by a quote in the latest issues of NAEYC's Young Children publication, where the author asked, "Shouldn't the classroom be ours, both children's and teachers?" Oh, it's such a great reminder that as a teacher, it's not just my classroom, but it's our classroom. It's a subtle difference, but that slight word change really shifts the focus to instantly project the intention that the classroom is a community for which everyone plays a really vital role. If children aren't recognized and treated as important members of the classroom community, how are they to learn and understand themselves as members in their homes or their own communities? How are they to gain an understanding of themselves as engaged and capable individuals who have important ideas to share? This is the foundation of lifelong learning. And isn't that really our goal? When I taught a course at Honolulu Community College on positive child guidance, I used to have my college students do this visualization exercise called 2020, and we'd imagine it was the year 2020. So you have to go back with me in time. That was way far off in the future. Can't believe that's only a couple years away now. But at the time, that 2020 was the time when the preschoolers we were teaching then would be adults. And I'd ask, what are the characteristics that we wanted them to have when we imagined this future? Ultimately, the words that they came up with were caring, loving, hopeful, happy, peaceful, kind, confident, creative, problem solvers, risk takers. We've since done this exercise so many times with teachers and administrators across the country in my 13 plus years here at Teaching Strategies, and I'm sure many of you have done something similar. Without fail, we get a list of those kinds of inspiring traits. No one ever says, gee, I really hope they know all their letters, or I hope they can count to 100 by fives, or tie their shoes by themselves. The words teachers share when thinking with hope about the future of the children they serve almost exclusively relate to the child's ability to maintain healthy, positive, strong relationships, or they're focused on positive ways of being and learning. The early childhood years are our chance to forever set children down the path to that kind of success. We as a field cannot and do not take this responsibility lightly.
So to build on that, Kai-leé, in their article, Teaching Emotional Intelligence in Early Childhood, the authors note that the research continues to show over and over again, still in 2020, that emotional intelligence leads to so many important outcomes for children and adults. For children, higher emotional intelligence contributes to being more empathetic, higher engagement in school, and the ability to self-regulate and manage their behavior, which so many folks talking to us before the webinar and prepping this, that was such a common theme of folks talking about. Kindness, caring, empathy, all these social emotional skills support and strengthen children's development and learning and contribute to children's success in school and in life. The National Institute of Early Education Research recently shared the results of a study published in Public Health that established a link between children's social skills and their success as adults. In fact, the researchers observed that children who were more helpful and generous in kindergarten were more likely to graduate from college, right? It's not just about math and literacy. If I don't know how to make a friend, if I don't know how to have a respectful conversation conversation with someone I disagree with if I don't have the confidence to share my big ideas and retry something when I'm incorrect? I certainly can't focus in on building the content knowledge that's also needed to be successful. The most current research both supports and refines this understanding of the power of teacher-child relationships, interactions, and learning partnerships. These positive relationships are crucial to children's social and emotional development, their learning, and to their future academic success. Research notes that these quality relationships positively influence children's social emotional competence, their persistence, and their enthusiasm for learning. Warm, supportive relationships encourage and strengthen children's motivation, engagement, self-direction, cooperation, and really ultimately positive attitudes towards school. All of these being essential skills and qualities for children's learning and development and their learning in later grades and beyond.
Oh, absolutely, Breeyn. Children learn best when they interact with others in a nurturing and supportive learning environment, when they build knowledge and understanding as they explore, investigate, and ask questions. These explorations and learning discoveries don't occur if it's not a safe space for learning. When children feel secure and safe in the classroom, they gain the confidence they need to freely and joyfully discover and explore. So the social climate not only fosters the caring relationships between children and teachers and others in the classroom, but also influences children's feelings towards learning. How children feel in the classroom is just as important as how they think. In fact, teachers' relationships with the children in their program make more of a difference than anything else that they can do. The focus and commitment to positive teacher-child interactions is shared across our field. This is not a new conversation. It's one we've been having for a long time, and we see it show up in measures of quality. So, for example, our Head Start partners and many others in the field in particular look not only to our tools to measure fidelity of teacher-child interactions, but also to CLASS, the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, which also focuses a great deal on the quality of these interactions in preschool classrooms. It is no surprise that so many of the resources designed to raise quality in programs are based on the shared research detailing how the interactions between children and the adults in their lives support children's development and learning and are the very foundation for all learning. And we stress this over and over again in the creative curriculum. Caring and teaching cannot be separated. You create a positive classroom community by building a relationship with each child in the class and supporting children as they build positive, caring relationships with each other. And when you create a positive classroom community, you're fostering these authentic and caring relationships. As a teacher, everything that you do to create a positive social environment in the classroom not only promotes children's social emotional skills, but also helps children become engaged and enthusiastic learners.
So in our Coaching to Fidelity tools for the creative curriculum for preschool, as all the things Kai-leé was just mentioning, led us to intentionally design the fidelity indicators in our tool, specifically those indicators that are addressing teacher-child interactions, to be weighted twice as much as all of the other indicators in the other sections of the tool. So as part of this series, we're talking about a lot of different areas. It's important to stress that we acknowledge this is worth twice as much as everything else if you're looking for some measures of success. You could be in the most beautiful, visually engaging environment, which hopefully we talked about last time, with the most up-to-date research-based curriculum at your fingertips. But if you don't have these strong teacher-child interactions, you can never hope to actually help all children be as successful as possible, right? So in quick summary, we've put up here on this slide the implementation items for teacher-child interactions that we use to measure fidelity in the creative curriculum for preschool. But intentionally, there are indicators of quality interactions that absolutely transcend curriculum resources.
Yes.
Looking at this list, these aren't the creative curriculum measures for this. The high quality preschool rooms, regardless of their curriculum, should be implementing these items consistently to be able to really measure those areas of success. So I'll just briefly run over these here. That the teacher establishes a positive classroom climate. The teacher guides children's behavior in positive, effective ways. The teacher uses effective strategies for guiding learning. learning. And then one here that teacher assistants interact with children in positive ways that to support development and learning. We have to make sure that we're committed to quality positive interactions for every child with every adult that they interact with in the program, not just that lead teacher. And there were actually some questions about that we'll address at the end of the webinar that came in ahead of time, but I think it's important thinking through this whole conversation that we're not separating out any professional in the room from this expectation of these positive interactions. The teacher effectively promotes English language acquisition of children who are English and dual language learners. The teacher uses both child-initiated and teacher-planned experiences to effectively guide language and literacy, the introduction of mathematical concepts, and to support children as they learn those concepts, processes, and skills in all of the other content areas. And then the only one here, the last one on the list, is the one that starts to feel a little bit more specific to the creative curriculum, is a fidelity measure that focuses in on the positive impact that the implementation of studies has on children's ability to investigate a meaningful topic over time and find answers to their questions. We see a direct connection in the creative curriculum of how that lays a foundation for rich interactions. But because positive climate of the classroom really lays the foundation for all the other items on the list that we just looked at, for the purpose of today, we're going to take a closer look at this first implementation item for teacher-child interactions, because we could do a whole series just on these items. But today we're going to focus in just on that first one of creating a classroom community and explore a few of the indicators around this implementation in greater depth.
Now, so rather than go through each of the indicators on this list individually, we're going to explore some strategies that you can use in establishing a positive classroom climate. You know, whenever we talk about education, development, learning, but particularly when we're talking about social emotional development and the social emotional environment, concepts, ideas, strategies, they're going to be overlapping, they're going to be interrelated. So rather than discretely focusing on individual indicators, we'll explore elements of practice that contribute to the overall whole of creating this positive classroom climate. So what does a positive classroom climate even mean? What does it look like? How does it evolve in responsive ways to meet the strengths and needs of all of the individual children in the classroom? Now, first, in a developmentally appropriate early childhood program, the classroom is a community, and you heard me stress that a bit at the beginning. It's a place where all are welcome, where all are respected, appreciated, and recognized as both individuals and as partners in learning. It's a community of learning where children, their families, their teachers, other program staff, they all feel safe, they all feel valued. We emphasize this idea of community of learning because the early childhood setting in which children develop these positive relationships, that's the foundation for all learning and where their social competence and sense of self is strengthened.
So whether a consistent approach to positive classroom climate, as Kai-leé has just described, is something that comes very naturally to you, or is something that you've had to work at honing over the years, oftentimes the impact of a positive classroom climate is far more significant than we may even realize. The reality is that for some children, their time with you in the classroom might be the only time in their day where they're in a warm, welcoming, and supportive place. The classroom's not just a physical space for learning for them. It's a safe space, a refuge for some of the children in your care. Just the other day, I was talking with a former preschool teacher, and he shared with me that one of his students from almost 20 years ago, a preschool student from almost 20 years ago, had recently reached out to him on social media, and she wanted to let him know that when she was in his class as a 4-year-old, there was a difficult family situation that was going on, and that her time in the classroom was the only time that she had to be playful, to be silly, and to feel listened to and acknowledged and understood as herself. It was almost 20 years ago, but during that stressful time in her life and in her family's life, what remained present in her memory was the fact that he as a teacher was a calm and nurturing presence in her life at that time. So when hearing a story like this, it's clear to me that this woman's thinking back fondly on a teacher who consistently maintained a nurturing and positive affect, something that possibly she wasn't always greeted with at home. So that was one of the first indicators that we look at here on the list, that this nurturing positive affect is necessary for establishing that positive classroom. You're a powerful model and example to the children in your classroom, to the other teachers and to other staff members in all that you do and say.
Yeah, there's this quote that I remember from a book on child guidance I read many years ago that said, every interaction you have with a child is message laden, with your words, with your actions, what you say or don't say, what you do or don't do. It's always communicating a message. It's such a powerful reminder that they're always looking to you for that message of hopefully positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're consistent in that, right? So knowing that they're always watching and always paying attention, there's a message that's there. We have to be consistent and nurturing in our responses and focused on children's strengthening that relationship with them and reinforcing the positive and welcoming messages that we want to have be the anchor of our classroom community. When we discuss a nurturing and positive affect, that includes how you interact with them and respond to them, but also how you show respect and empathy towards children in your program, towards their families and other teachers and colleagues in your program staff. You're showing children what you mean by respect and kindness. We're not throwing these words around, but we're modeling it. We're showing up every day and presenting that. Some of the strategies that are out there for maintaining a positive affect are commonplace in the field and often a part of our natural tendencies to be warm and engaging with children. Things like greeting children and their families each morning with a warm smile and a hello, bending down to rub the back of a child who's just taken a stumble on the playground, sharing encouragement and excitement after observing a child demonstrate kindness to a peer. These are the things that come very naturally to many of us when we're working with children. But it's actually those moments when children demonstrate behaviors that we find challenging. That's where we have to stretch this muscle. Like Kai-leé just said, this is when it really matters. How we respond when Liam tries to escape that gate on the playground for the third day of the week, when Anastasia knocks over her neighbor's lunchbox and then refuses to help her friend pick it up, when Nicolina gets so frustrated with the block tower that she's building that she begins kicking all the blocks out of the block area. These are those true teachable and powerful moments. Children are watching how you'll respond. The patience, care, and calmness, that moment you take to take a deep breath, that calmness that you bring to the situation that you find challenging, no matter how challenging it may be, that's what models for children strategies that they can lean on well into adulthood when they too are presented with situations that they find challenging. When you talk with children respectfully and considerately at all times, children feel and know that you value and respect them and the other children in the class. When you use your knowledge of the children in your classroom, their temperaments, their needs, and their individual circumstances, and when you consistently respond to their feelings, you're showing all of the children in the class that you see them and that you support them all as individuals. When you talk with children, as you know, your tone of voice can communicate so many different things. It can communicate excitement, enthusiasm, interest, acceptance, and patience, but it can also communicate dismissiveness, disinterest. Unintentionally, we could be communicating annoyance, irritation, or even criticism sometimes. Body language can also communicate different things to children, right? So you're interacting with and responding with children. Something as simple as smiling or nodding as you listen to a child lets her know that she has your full attention. Another key part of nurturing a positive affect is demonstrating sensitivity to children's feelings. It's rather serious business being a child, right? Learning and growing, developing skills and understanding of what sometimes can be powerful and overwhelming feelings. Children want and need for their feelings to be taken seriously, but they often need your support and understanding in managing these feelings. If a child is seeking out your support, it's important that we don't ever dismiss children's feelings, right? Big girls going into kindergarten don't worry about little things like that, or let's turn that frown upside down, or where's my positive Pollyanna? These statements, while absolutely well-intentioned of focusing and turning a negative feeling into a positive one, don't actually address the child's feelings at all of embarrassment, worry, fear, nervousness, or sadness. So many of the strategies out there, and I know this frustrated me as a new teacher, they talk all the time about helping children to use their words. But as a 3 or 4-year-old, I may not know the words that I need to articulate how I'm feeling, right? So telling a 3-year-old, use your words, when I don't have the expressive vocabulary to include this collection of feeling words, feels even more frustrating and overwhelming when I'm already at that place. One of our intentional teaching experiences we have for preschool actually breaks that strategy down a little bit, so that when you notice a child experiencing a strong emotion, that we all know it's so important to move to that child and position ourselves at their level. But then also we want to be coaching the child on how to express their feelings. Children new to this skill are likely to need us to provide the words for them, and then to ask them to try saying them with us. So, Joseph, I see that you're grabbing for those markers that Kyle's using. You can ask, may I have some of the markers too, please? Or may you move a cup closer to me? Now you try. And then as children gain more and more confidence with this skill, instead of giving them the words to use, we can try asking questions. Joseph, I see that you're reaching for the markers. I see that you want to use those markers. How could you ask for help in reaching them, so that we're coaching them to feel more armed with those strategies? Another strategy for helping children build this expressive vocabulary for feeling words is through book discussions. Especially at the beginning of the year, these rich book discussions can provide a wonderful vehicle to introduce vocabulary and scaffold children's understanding of different emotions. Titles focused on community, meeting new people, feeling nervous, welcoming others, and qualities of a good friend set the stage for additional informal discussions as we help children make connections to their everyday experiences. Wemberly is a character that we use often at the beginning of the year in creative curriculum. Wemberly is worried, if you're not familiar with Wemberly, but she's worried about starting a new school. She's nervous that no one will be the same as her. She's scared to be away from her mother, all things we know many children entering our program feel. These feelings, though, oftentimes feel more comfortable navigating and discussing when children can make parallels to a familiar character that they've interacted with. You can use a character like Wemberly to engage children in learning new strategies for overcoming their own worries or role-playing different approaches in a safe and engaging environment.
Thanks, Breeyn. Responding to children in a way that acknowledges and honors their feelings and their role in the classroom is also part of truly listening and engaging with children in conversations. So you mentioned being a good listener and being fully present. And truly listening is being an active listener, giving your full attention, making eye contact as appropriate, and responding with a tone of voice and body language that shows you're engaged with the person you're speaking with, and using language that communicates an accurate understanding. So giving your full attention means just that. When I'm trying to tell a loved one about my difficult day and they're nodding and smiling and saying, but they're steadily texting on their telephone, I stop talking. I'm clearly not important enough to warrant that person's full attention in the moment. It is not a good feeling. I think we've all been on the receiving side of that. But that's how children feel when we nod and smile and as they talk to us, but we're busy multitasking. We're wiping down tables. We're stapling artwork on the bulletin board. We're recording an observation note. We're fixing snack. Yes, there will absolutely 100% be plenty of times in the day where those kinds of conversations, those informal and slightly distracted conversations take place. They're important. They're part of your rhythm of the day. So make sure that you have large blocks of time during the day when you can give children your full attention. And certainly make sure that you can give it when emotions are running high. Getting down on their level, making eye contact, or offering a gentle touch if that's appropriate. Use your body language and your tone of voice and your words to communicate understanding. Depending on the development of the child and the situation, active listening might sound like, "Oh, you're so sad that your mama left. You didn't want her to go on her trip. It's really hard to say goodbye to someone we love. Or it could sound more like, you are so sad. You really want your mama. You really, really wish she was here. You don't want her to go. Depending on a child's development, more or less emotional expression is needed for the child to really know that you heard them. Responsive and reflective statements are something that pair really well with active listening and show children you're paying attention to what they're saying, that you recognize and acknowledge them, and you're valuing what they're saying and doing. They're also really great for starting conversations and encouraging that kind of back and forth positive conversation that we've been alluding to. When you respond respectfully to children, you're listening attentively. So a responsive reflective statement might be, oh, you visited your cousins this weekend and had a picnic. What did you most enjoy doing that day? You can show enthusiasm for what they're sharing with you. I didn't know that pyramids were that tall. What else did you learn when you and your auntie read that book about Egypt together? You can give them encouragement and the positive feedback that they need to continue their efforts and to recognize and know the value of their interests and discoveries. So, I noticed that you're painting a forest. It reminds me of the forest in the book we read during Read Aloud. I see that you're now mixing the yellow paint with the blue paint. What do you think will happen after you mix those two colors? An easy way to incorporate responsive and reflective statements into our conversations with children is simply to say what we see. This doesn't have to be complicated. We can just say, I see your purple painting. Just say what you see. I see you put all of the square blocks back where they belong. I see your smiling face. You seem really happy about your new socks. It's our modeling and encouragement of these back and forth exchanges that support children in building their independence, in initiating and sustaining their own conversations with their peers and other adults. And we know how important communication is in relationship building. These active and engaged conversations support children's self-expression and their creativity. And when you're recognizing, acknowledging, and then responding to a child's discoveries, feelings, interests, explorations, you're supporting her on so many levels. She feels and knows that the classroom is a safe and caring place, that her interests are important, that her needs are being recognized and met, and that she's being listened to. When children experience and know that they're really being listened to, they're often more open to hearing what we have to say, right? And to listening to what the other children in the classroom have to say.
Thanks, Kai-leé. As we think about these interactions that Kai-leé and I have both talked a bit about, these positive and intentional responses to children, they're really the crucial foundation for promoting that sense of classroom community, which is really where our conversation began. So while the work on maintaining a classroom community is one that absolutely needs attention throughout the year, as children's needs and their interests change and the dynamics of relationships shift in the classroom, there are several things that you might consider at the beginning of the year that will help to ensure that you start off strong and lay a solid foundation. So when you're thinking through planning carefully for the first few days of school, so that children can make the necessary transition and feel comfortable, I found that it's helpful to put yourself in the place of 3-year-old Maddie, who's leaving her mom for the very first time, or 4-year-old Juan, who's been in the program for several years, but this is the first year where he's going to be having a new teacher, right? Think about the children that you're serving and think about what those children might be feeling, what their concerns likely are. What would they tell you if they could clearly articulate themselves? What would they ask you, right? They want to know, what am I going to do here? Will I be safe? Will my teachers be kind to me? Will my teachers like me? And will the other children like me, right? In the first few weeks of school, children have a lot to understand and learn. There's a lot going on, right? We're meeting so many new people people for the first time, other children, other adults, children, family members, and teachers in the classroom. We're learning what they may or may not be able to do. They're learning where things are located around the room and how to use them and take care of their classroom materials. Similar to how you approach your design and intentional choices for setting up the physical environment and daily structure to support the first weeks of school, your approach to your interactions during these first few weeks are just as critical in helping children as they transition into becoming members of the classroom community. So allowing sufficient time for true hellos and goodbyes,
Yes.
keeping those first group meetings short. This is a question I get all the time in training. Of course, your small group looks very different in August when you're welcoming 3-year-olds than it does at the end of a pre-K year. They need to be short, and taking children on a tour of the classroom. Don't take for granted that they understand the flow of the physical environment. These are just a few ways that your caring and welcoming interactions will nurture and support children as they're getting started. Those first impressions are awfully important. In the beginning of the year, you might consider displaying photos of children with their family members in the classroom, and consider taking photos of children and families as they arrive and you welcome them to their first day. And you'll want to make sure you include your own pictures and pictures of other teachers in the room. I actually used to send a photo of myself and my co-teacher to families before they even started school. And my daughter starts a program, and I've asked for that teacher to send us a picture, so that there's just that familiarity. There's that feeling of connection before we've even gotten started. As children get to know other members of the program community, right, as they're introduced to the director, the custodian, your chef, the nurse, administrators, all of those different important faces for them to know, we can start to include those classrooms in our include those photos in our classroom environment. And then as the year progresses, you can take photos of children and what they're working on and exploring and creating in the classroom as that evolved. Additionally, another thing to think about in starting the year is thinking about classroom jobs. Because the room really belongs to everyone, as we talked about the quote Kai-leé said earlier, because it's not your room, but it's the children's room as well. Taking care of it really should be a shared responsibility, a group effort and collaboration. Every child and every teacher should play a role in supporting daily and weekly jobs. So when thinking about your classroom jobs this year, consider not falling into the cadence of the traditional jobs, right? We know we've got a line leader, there may be a weather helper or cleanup bell ringer, but take some time, or even with the children in your classroom, to think about what jobs need to happen in a classroom community. Should someone be responsible for ensuring that the classroom plants are really checked daily, and then decide if they need water, not just water the plant every day? Should someone be taking a look at seeing who was absent yesterday and inviting them over to the library area during choice time so they can tell them about the story that they missed and read aloud and get them caught up there? Can someone be the allergy helper and help read the ingredients of the snack with an assistant teacher and make sure that it doesn't have milk or soy, since those are the two ingredients we know children in our class are allergic to? Children want to be helpers, and when you give them the opportunity to do so, they'll experience being a crucial part of supporting and maintaining the classroom, which then builds their understanding of themselves as a crucial, important member of the classroom community.
And with those classroom responsibilities, I really like to think about rules and responsibilities as working hand in hand. So the last strategy we'll offer today when thinking about how to best support a positive classroom climate at the beginning of the year is an intentional and responsive approach to creating classroom rules. So establishing limits and talking with children about consequences of behaviors and actions helps children understand why rules are needed in the first place. And involving children in deciding the rules, that's a powerful way to encourage them to share responsibility for that community life in a classroom. Children are more likely to understand and follow rules that they themselves help create. Having consistent rules is a powerful strategy to be able to provide an environment where your focus can be on positive child interactions related to discovery and learning, rather than spending a disproportionate amount of time on redirecting behaviors. highlighted in the beginning of the year teaching guide, we like to use the big rule, little rule approach to setting rules in a classroom. And it's something that I used as a teacher so successfully and have helped teachers do in their classrooms that I actually use this with my children at home. Even now, with my children who are almost 8 years old and 12, we still have the Berke family rules that are posted on our refrigerator, and we use this big rule, little rule strategy when we're enforcing our family rules together. So our intentional teaching experience that you see on your screen, this big rule, little rule, supports a teacher in guiding a new classroom community through the process of collaboratively deciding on what the 3 or 4 big rules for the classroom should be. So you want to enroll the children. Before you do that, really spend some time thinking yourself about what rules are absolutely essential to you. There are things that you're going to care more about, and that's important because you are perhaps the most critical member of the classroom community. So you want to do a little reflection there yourself. And then lead a discussion with the children that guides them to think about possible problems and identify some key classroom rules as solutions. So when you're talking to young children about this, you might have to help guide the conversation along, right? Something like, I wonder how we're going to make sure that we take care of our things here at school. What can we do to take care of our things? Or, my job is to make sure everyone here is safe. What does that mean? What does being safe mean? And start to have a conversation with them about that. Children will very, very quickly start to generate rules, and I'll put air quotes around the word or the word rules there. Children are very likely to say, no hitting, no pushing, no standing on the table, right? They're very quick to frame rules in a what they shouldn't be doing way. And so our job is, as we're having this conversation, to start to reframe what they're saying in a positive way. So we're focusing the conversation on what they should do rather than on what they should not do. So, okay, so no hitting or pushing. We need to make sure that we touch each other gently, that we treat each other's bodies with respect. What does that mean? And to continue the conversation in that positive way. Once you have this large group of rules, and believe me, you could come up with 100 or more when you sit down with a group of 4-year-olds to brainstorm these, you can start to group them into categories. So with older children, as you're doing this experience, you'll be able to go through your list and take your green marker and circle all the ones that have to do with safety. Right? Then you can go through with your purple marker and circle all the ones that have to do with kindness or respect, and go through with another color and circle all the ones that have to do with taking care of materials. Generally in our classrooms, our rules will fall into those kind of 3 big buckets: being kind and respectful, being safe, and taking care of the materials and the environment that we're in. Once you've established those rules, you use the big rule, little rule when you're enforcing them. So be kind to others is your big rule. Your little rules associated with that could be use a quiet voice in the library. Keep your hands to yourself when you're feeling angry. And as you enforce rules in that way, be safe, keep your bottom in the chair when you're sitting. Be safe, walk inside the building. Be safe. Stay on the top rung of the climber. However it is that the little rule is that you're trying to enforce along with the big one, if you use this big rule, little rule strategy over and over again, children will start to get an understanding of the broad concept. What does it mean to be safe? They're never going to memorize the litany of small rules that you could have. Just think about all the rules you could have in your classroom just related to the block area, right? There's no way they can memorize all those rules. But over time, by using the big rule, little rule strategy, they can learn what it means in general to be safe. And then they can start to generalize that to new situations, to situations where maybe you're not there to help enforce the rule, but they'll have built an understanding of what it means to be safe, to be kind, and to take care of their things. So that's the big rule, little rule strategy.
I actually have a funny story of a family that when I was using this, she had shared that she had asked her son to stop running. And one day he said, "I'm not running, I'm galloping." And that it was this idea of her hearing me say, "We need to be safe, let's use our walking feet."
Yes.
That then it's like, oh, okay, I wasn't running, but yes, now I understand what walking feet means. That's something that I can do.
And the best part about this is consistently, if you use this strategy, the children in your classroom will use this strategy, and they'll say to each other, be kind to others, share the markers, right? And they'll just start to use that as part of the language of the classroom. So just as in that parent-child relationship, the quality of the teacher-child relationship can support or limit a child's development and learning. It's why the field has focused so much attention on these quality teacher-child interactions. Oh, my colleagues at Teaching Strategies hear me say this often, but I do think it always bears repeating. For young children, their model of all future relationships, who they want to be, how to trust, how to love, how to be empathetic, how to enjoy a good book, how to be curious, confident, engaged learners. Teachers' relationships with children have the power to dramatically influence all of those things. And that's why we have placed so much importance on the quality of these interactions. So as you're beginning the school year and thinking about creating that positive classroom climate and nurturing those critical relationships with young children, I hope you'll be able to look back at some of these strategies, talking respectfully with children, demonstrating sensitivity to their feelings, supporting children to use their words and to accurately identify feelings, being a true active listener to the children in our classroom, using those responsive and reflective statements, communicating positive messages through the environment, and establishing those classroom rules and responsibilities will really help to create that foundation. So I think we still have some time to talk about some of the questions that came in.
Yeah.
So we had some that came in prior to the webinar, and then we have some that have come in while Breeyn and I have been talking. So again, we'll try to get to as many as we can, and if we don't get to it now, we'll follow up with you individually via email.
Yep. Absolutely. So Kai-leé, one of the questions that just came in, I'm just going to pop back, was asking what the yellow and blue stand for. So while we're quick to that slide on the teaching sequence.
Sure. So we have something that we use called Objectives for Development and Learning that shows the trajectory of development and learning from birth through third grade. Each age, class, or grade has an associated color. So for example, yellow is generally 2-year-olds, and the development and widely held expectations associated with 2-year-olds. Green are 3-year-olds, blue is pre-K, purple is a kindergarten expectation. So in all of our materials and resources, we refer back to these objectives for development and learning, and sometimes we refer to the colors themselves as a way to look at the progression of teaching and learning over time. So in this instance, it's a teaching sequence that's showing you, okay, if I have a child who, for this particular objective, is focused on participating cooperatively in constructive and group situations, it's about social problem solving. If I have a child whose knowledge, skills, and behaviors associated with that are generally more like the widely held expectations of a 2-year-old, or if my group is a group of young 3s, I know to start with that yellow and green section of the teaching sequence. So when leading a discussion about rules, I'm going to keep it very short. I'm going to keep it concrete. I'm going to ask specific questions that encourage children to think about the rule categories, right? I'm going to guide the conversation. If I'm doing this experience with a group of children, a group of pre-K children, I am going to lead a discussion, but encourage children to talk about the purpose of the rules. I'm going to go through that categorization exercise with them that I talked about, because I know that developmentally they're ready for that. Generally, this teaching sequence is broken up into a more discrete teaching sequence than this. So as you look at our materials, sometimes you'll see there might be 4 or 5 strategies here instead of 2. It just depends on what the experience is.
Yeah. Great. I just thought since we were close to that slide, I would jump to that question. Some of the kind of common buckets that we saw some questions coming ahead of time, there were 2 of those I thought we could address, and then we'll jump back to some that have come here. One question we got in a couple of different ways was really talking about the teacher assistant, right? And what's the responsibility of the teacher assistant to provide these teacher-child interactions, and how do we help a co-teacher to be positive in this? We know oftentimes that assistant teacher or co-teacher role might not have access to the same professional development that you have as a lead teacher has. It may not have that same level of experience. So first off, we talked about this in the beginning, it's absolutely just as paramount and critical that they're driving these positive interactions. Sometimes I would argue it can oftentimes even be more important, because oftentimes the lead teacher is the one that's engaging the entire classroom community in an experience or discussion, and the child who has an elevated feeling of frustration or something going on that needs to be addressed, it's oftentimes the assistant teacher or co-teacher that swoops in to support that, so the lead teacher can continue engaging the classroom community. So that investment in professional development and support for that assistant or co-teacher is so critical. I've also seen it helpful in programs I've coached to ask the co-teacher to record her during an interaction, not for you to watch as the coach to analyze, but just for her to get to watch. Sometimes seeing yourself in the classroom, I did this throughout my entire teaching career, and I always learned something new, especially when we think about tone of voice and affect. And a teacher may absolutely have the best of intentions of what they're saying, but seeing themselves back and hearing that tone sometimes can make quite an impression for just some self-investment and growth.
Absolutely. And I've also found that it can be helpful to just give a very specific strategy to try for a week. Mm-hmm. So responsive and reflective statements are a really good one to hand over. Frequently, you'll hear people in the classroom use the phrase, I like a lot. So I like your painting. I like the way you cleaned up. I like the way you're sitting, right? And just giving one strategy at a time to work on. So just shifting that language from I like to saying I see. So giving the challenge of, okay, this week we're going to really focus on describing what we see children doing. So we're going to say, I see you painting. I see you put all the blocks away. And just start to shift, those tiny little shifts in language and our approach with interactions can be so powerful. It's also a really good strategy to give to families as they're in the classroom, if you have family participation in your program, to hand them a strategy like that they can easily use, helps them to give some focus to their interaction. Because sometimes when folks aren't maybe as accustomed to interacting with large groups of children or haven't had the opportunity for advanced professional development, they're not as confident in their ability to do these things. And they hear something that sounds like, positive teacher-child interactions, and that feels really big and really complicated. So giving one easy strategy that they can do, and then you can capitalize on their success. And you can say, wow, that was so cool when you said that I see that you used all the purple paint. That great conversation then that you had with Carly about that. That's a great way to help building them up. We're just going to keep talking about that. Let's move on. Sorry.
No, that's fine. One of the other common themes that came through, and I've seen popped up during the webinar too, is really talking specifically around, when there is a child whose behavior I just find so unbelievably challenging or frustrating, and that it could even appear to me as the educator that there is no reason, right? That I've hit this wall of what that might look like.
Yeah, we call that here when there's a button pusher behavior, right? So first, it's really important for you to know what are the behaviors that a child can exhibit that push your buttons. So what is that challenging behavior that makes your heart race, that makes your face get flushed, that makes you feel like, this is too much for me? We always talk in early childhood as if we're these people who are perfectly capable of being very even-keeled in any situation, until you see your button pusher behavior. So for me, mine's really odd, but it's limp legs. When you're walking and holding a child's hand and whatever's happening, they're upset about something and they make their legs go limp. I don't know what it is about that, but that is the thing that just makes me have to close my eyes, take a deep breath, and count to 10. I have been hit by children. I've been spit on. I've been cursed at. I've had, obviously, children be physically aggressive with each other, flip tables. None of that rattles me, but limp legs, that's the thing that does it. So you have to know what it is that is your button pusher behavior. And then those behaviors are often the ones that we can't get to the bottom of. So for some teachers, that is physical aggression against other children. That's a very common one, or biting, also tends to be directed towards other children. To know what that is, because in those moments, oftentimes you need someone else to come in. You need a second set of eyes to come in, because the key about human development and human behavior in general, whether you are 2 years old or 82 years old, is there is a reason for every behavior. Everything we do, there's a reason for it. It is meeting some need, whether that need is attention, whether that need is communication. Even though it could be the worst possible way to communicate, they're trying to communicate. It could be that it is an expression of their confusion, their lack of understanding, their frustration, their inability, that they're not able to do that thing yet that's being asked of them. You think about small group time, and children all have a set of counters in front of them, and you've asked them to build a tower with 5 cubes, and the child who picks his cubes up and throws them at another child, that could be an expression of, I can't do this. That makes me angry. That makes me feel bad. I'm going to act out that expression of that feeling. So to know your button pushers, to be able to bring in a second set of eyes to observe, because you can't solve the challenge until you know the reason why. And as soon as you know the reason why, every behavior is infinitely solvable. And I know that sounds really like flippant, and I'm not trying to be, but it's really getting to the reason behind the action. And Breeyn and I have talked about this a lot. Like we could talk about this topic for hours on end. We actually just released a new online professional development course on child guidance, and we were reading it together and debating whether or not there was enough in there on challenging behaviors, because they're challenging behaviors for a reason. They challenge us.
Yes, agree. And one of the things we continue to talk about, though, is that it's the strategies to overcome when you're met with those behaviors we find challenging. But I think oftentimes, too, there's this weight of how do I react to the behavior? But when a lot of things we've talked about, if you have within your practice the physical environments that are developmentally appropriate and work for the children you have, and this positive approach, and you're using the strategies here, some of those challenging behaviors take care of themselves just by the very nature of creating this community and this environment where a child can answer those questions of, my teacher does like me, I do feel safe, I do understand what's expected of me. I think we have to make sure that we have that balanced conversation, and which is why we were so glad that so many of you chose to join us for more of that part of the conversation today. So we're just skimming through a few more questions.
So it looks like we are out of time, unfortunately.
Oh gosh, look at that.
So we definitely will be following up with you. I see here that there were a few more questions that came in while we were talking. So we will follow up with you via email. Thank you so much for taking the time today. There will be a recording of this that we'll be emailing out to all of you as well.
Yep. Great.
So thank you so much for being with us, and good luck to the start of your new school year.
Thank you.